Have you ever chased something so beautiful it almost destroyed you and loved it anyway? That's the ache at the heart of The Great Gatsby. Written in 1925 by F.C. Scott Fitzgerald, this novel captures an America drunk on jazz, money, and illusion. It's the story of a nation dancing on the edge of a dream, and one man who dared to believe he could buy back time. Fitzgerald himself was the golden boy of the Jazz Age, dazzlingly talented, heartbreakingly human. By the time he was 30, he'd written This Side of Paradise, Tender is the Night, and The Great Gatsby, a book that would one day crown him as one of the finest American stylists who ever lived. Ironically, when it first came out, The Great Gatsby wasn't an immediate success. It sold modestly, received lukewarm reviews, and faded into near obscurity. But decades later, it was rediscovered and transformed into a classic, hailed by the modern library as the second greatest English-language novel of the 20th century, just behind Ulysses. Today, it's studied in classrooms, whispered about in coffee shops, and endlessly adapted on screen. Its words still shimmer like champagne. Listen to this one. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. That line alone feels like the heartbeat of the century, nostalgic, restless, and quietly tragic. In this episode of Echoes of Books, we'll slip into the glitter and shadows of The Great Gatsby to meet Jay Gatsby, Daisy Buchanan, and a world that never stopped dreaming, even as it destroyed itself trying to. If you love stories that hold a mirror to human longing, remember to like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Books, or support us with a small donation to keep this journey through literature alive. Soft jazz plays under the words, the kind that feels like champagne bubbles dissolving on your skin. Our story begins in the summer of 1922, in West Egg, Long Island, a glittering patch of the American dream just across the bay from New York City. Into this world arrives Nick Carraway, a quiet observer from the Midwest who has come east to learn the bond business. He rents a small cottage wedged between two vast mansions, one of which belongs to a man who throws parties so grand they seem to swallow the night. The man's name is Jay Gatsby. At first, Gatsby is just a rumor floating on the summer air. Some say he's a German spy. Others whisper he once killed a man. Yet no one really knows him, though everyone drinks his champagne. People come from miles away, rich, reckless, young, to dance under his glowing lanterns and pretend they belong to something beautiful. Fitzgerald's description is intoxicating. He writes, in his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. Nick soon learns that Gatsby's mansion stands directly across the bay from another, the home of Tom and Daisy Buchanan. Tom is old money, athletic, arrogant, and cruel. Daisy is Nick's cousin, her voice described as full of money, the kind of voice that makes men believe in impossible things. Their marriage is polished on the outside and broken within. Tom is having an affair with Myrtle Wilson, a woman from the gray wasteland called the Valley of Ashes, a place where ashes grow like wheat, symbolizing the decay behind the city's glitter. Myrtle dreams of luxury and love, but her dreams are as doomed as Gatsby's. Nick finally receives an invitation to one of Gatsby's legendary parties, something almost no one ever gets. When he meets Gatsby, he's surprised. The man isn't the sinister figure of gossip, but a smiling, hopeful dreamer. "I'm Gatsby," he says simply, his voice both confident and trembling. He stands tall, impeccably dressed, and somehow fragile, like a man holding his breath before a miracle. Over time, Nick discovers Gatsby's secret. Years earlier, when he was a poor young soldier named James Gatz, he fell in love with Daisy. She was his vision of heaven. But when he went to war, she married Tom, the safer, wealthier choice. Since then, Gatsby has built his fortune through mysterious means, possibly illegal, to win her back. His mansion, his cars, his glittering life. All of it is a monument to one idea, that love and money can make time rewind. Nick arranges a reunion between Gatsby and Daisy. The scene is tender, almost awkward, a tea party trembling with unspoken longing. Daisy's voice shakes when she sees him. Gatsby's hands fumble with a clock, nearly dropping it, as if time itself resists being held. For a brief, enchanted summer, they seem to find each other again. Gatsby believes that the past can be restored exactly as it was. He tells Nick, "Can't repeat the past? Why, of course you can." But in Fitzgerald's world, that's the most dangerous illusion of all. The illusion begins to unravel when Tom grows suspicious. In the suffocating heat of a New York afternoon, he confronts Gatsby in the Plaza Hotel. The air feels heavy, the truth unavoidable. Tom exposes Gatsby's shady business dealings and mocks his attempt to climb into their world. Daisy, torn between them, breaks under pressure. That night, as they drive back, tragedy strikes. Daisy, behind the wheel of Gatsby's yellow car, hits Myrtle Wilson on the road and kills her instantly. Gatsby takes the blame. The next morning, Gatsby waits for Daisy's call, believing she will choose him, that love will triumph. But the call never comes. Instead, Myrtle's husband, misled by Tom, comes to Gatsby's house and shoots him dead. Gatsby dies floating in his pool, staring at the sky, as if still dreaming of that green light across the bay, the one that had guided him through all those impossible nights. Nick is left to pick up the pieces. No one from Gatsby's glamorous circle comes to the funeral. The mansion stands empty, its lights gone out, the laughter replaced by silence. Disgusted by the carelessness of the rich, who smash up things and creatures and then retreat back into their money, Nick leaves New York and returns to the Midwest, carrying the ghost of that summer within him. As he reflects, he writes words that still echo through American literature. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. And that's the spell of The Great Gatsby, a story so short and simple on the surface, yet filled with the shimmering ache of every dream that never quite came true. The internal lens, structure, style, and voice. The jazz fades into something quieter here, a slow piano under the words, the kind that sounds like memory being replayed. One of the marvels of The Great Gatsby is how much emotion Fitzgerald fits into such a small frame. Barely 50,000 words. The novel feels larger than life because of its architecture. Every scene echoes another, like reflections in water, parties and funerals, desire and loss, illusion and exposure. Fitzgerald builds tension not through plot twists, but through rhythm. The novel breathes, it swells with hope, pauses in silence, and collapses into melancholy. At the heart of this rhythm is the narrator, Nick Carraway. He isn't just telling the story, he's composing it. His voice gives the novel its temperature, warm, ironic, and quietly judgmental. We experience everything through his sensibility, which makes us both close to Gatsby and distanced from him. Nick is both participant and philosopher, the watcher in the corner at the party. He claims to be honest, but his honesty often hides his fascination. When he says, "I was within and without," simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life, he describes not just himself, but every reader who has ever loved and judged Gatsby at the same time. Fitzgerald's structure is deliberate. The novel opens not with Gatsby, but with Nick's moral reflection. We meet the Buchanans, glimpse their brittle world of wealth, and only then hear rumors about the man next door. Gatsby himself doesn't appear until chapter 3 and more than a quarter into the book. This slow unveiling is key. By the time we meet him, Gatsby already feels mythic, a ghost made of stories. The first thing he does is smile, one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it. That line is almost cinematic, as if Fitzgerald had already imagined the camera lingering on that face, lit by the glow of fireworks. The prose itself feels like jazz, sentences that swell, cascade, and then fall into silence. Fitzgerald writes with a rhythm that seduces the ear. Phrases like the golden arm of the sun, or the inexhaustible charm that rose and fell in it, the jingle of it, the cymbals' song. His language dances between elegance and exhaustion. You can sense both the beauty of wealth and the sadness beneath it, the way light always falls on something fading, and the tone. That's where the novel's magic truly lives. Fitzgerald doesn't tell us what to feel. He lets contrast do the work. The parties are described with such delight that you forget they're hollow. The love scenes shimmer with tenderness until you realize they're built on ghosts. The final chapters are stripped of ornament, the sentences bare, the music gone. It's as if the prose itself runs out of champagne and must sober up. Another reason The Great Gatsby feels so timeless is its balance between intimacy and distance. The story unfolds in first person, but Nick's language often drifts into poetry, something larger than personal confession. We aren't just reading about Gatsby, we're reading about America's capacity for self-invention, told by a man who both envies and mourns that power. Nick's narration blurs fact and memory until the book feels like a dream retold. That's why every reader leaves with slightly different memories of what really happened. Even the structure mirrors Gatsby's psychology. The novel moves in circles, beginnings that echo endings, hope rising only to fall. Gatsby's parties early in the book mirror his lonely pool at the end. Both scenes involve water, reflection, and the search for light. Daisy's house and Gatsby's mansion face each other across the bay, like twin illusions. The narrative rhythm makes us feel the inevitability of collapse long before it happens. What's most striking, though, is how Fitzgerald uses language to both reveal and conceal truth. Gatsby's words are rehearsed, charming, slightly off, like someone playing a role they built for survival. Nick's words, on the other hand, are beautiful but evasive. Between them lies the real story, a world where truth is always dressed in costume. The deeper you look, the more you realize that The Great Gatsby isn't about what's said, but about what's unsaid, the pauses between the sentences, the silences between two people who once loved each other and now pretend they never did. When Fitzgerald writes, there are only the pursued, the pursuing, and the busy, and the tired. It feels like he's describing not just the characters, but the rhythm of his own prose, a perpetual motion between yearning and surrender. And maybe that's why this short novel endures. Its language does what Gatsby himself tried to do. It turns longing into something immortal, even if it only lasts for a page. The historical and cultural lens, the Jazz Age Mirage. The music rises again, a brassy swing that shimmers with champagne energy, the heartbeat of the 1920s. But listen closely, and there's something underneath it, a faint ticking, like time running out. To understand The Great Gatsby, you have to imagine the world that created it. America in the 1920s was a country between two ghosts, the trauma of World War I and the shadow of the Great Depression still waiting in the wings. The war had disillusioned an entire generation. The old moral codes, faith, restraint, duty, felt obsolete. What replaced them was a feverish hunger for pleasure, speed, and reinvention. The Jazz Age was born, and Fitzgerald, with his sharp suits and even sharper pen, became its poet laureate. He and Zelda were icons, the glittering couple who seemed to live inside a novel. They danced on tabletops, drove through Europe in open cars, and drank until dawn. Newspapers called them the golden couple of the roaring 20s, but behind that glamour was a restlessness that mirrored his fiction. Fitzgerald once wrote, "Show me a hero, and I'll write you a tragedy." And that's exactly what he did with Gatsby. The 1920s were a paradox. Economic boom, moral decay. The stock market soared, alcohol flowed despite prohibition, and the American dream, that myth that hard work and ambition can create happiness, became both religion and illusion. People built fortunes overnight, but they also lost their souls chasing them. Fitzgerald saw through the glitter and realized it was fool's gold. West Egg and East Egg, the two fictional communities in The Great Gatsby, are more than settings, they are social geography. East Egg represents old money, inherited privilege, and the quiet arrogance of those who never had to climb. West Egg, where Gatsby lives, symbolizes the new rich, self-made, gaudy, restless. It's the eternal tension of America, the dreamers and the gatekeepers, the believers and the born. Fitzgerald knew both worlds. He was educated enough to enter drawing rooms, but insecure enough to feel he didn't belong. That anxiety hums through every page. The Valley of Ashes, stretching between the eggs in New York City, is another crucial image. A gray wasteland where laborers shovel ashes under the giant billboard of Dr. T. J. Eckelberg's eyes, faded and watching. This valley isn't just a backdrop, it's the underside of the dream. All that glittering wealth produces waste, both moral and literal. It's where Myrtle Wilson lives, where hope goes to die. Critics often call it a prophetic image, an early glimpse of environmental ruin and social inequality. Fitzgerald might not have known he was predicting the future, but he understood that progress always leaves ashes somewhere. Gatsby's parties are pure Jazz Age theater. The orchestra, the laughter, the endless supply of gin, all illegal, all intoxicating. But the extravagance conceals desperation. These people aren't celebrating success. They're trying to forget emptiness. Each guest performs a version of themselves, just as Gatsby performs his identity. It's performance as existence, the American way. When Fitzgerald writes, people were not invited, they went there. He captures a culture obsessed with movement, with being seen, with belonging to something even if it means nothing. If Gatsby is the dreamer, then Tom Buchanan is the nightmare of privilege. He represents the class that clings to power through arrogance and cruelty. Tom's racism, his sense of entitlement, his casual violence, all reflect the dark side of the 1920s elite. The age of jazz was also the age of fear. Fear of change, of immigrants, of new money. Tom's disdain for Gatsby's drugstores and his claim that civilization is breaking down expose the hypocrisy of a class that preaches morality while living in corruption. Daisy, meanwhile, embodies the era's ideal of femininity, beautiful, passive, gilded. She's both a woman and a symbol, the prize of capitalism, the ultimate object of desire. In the 1920s, women were gaining more freedom. They could vote, drive, dance, cut their hair short. Yet Fitzgerald's Daisy remains trapped, floating between rebellion and dependence. Her tragedy isn't just personal, it's historical. She belongs to a generation told it could have everything, only to find the cost was its soul. And then there's Fitzgerald himself, both insider and outsider to this world. He loved its rhythm but distrusted its values. He enjoyed its luxury but wrote like a man haunted by conscience. He once said that America is a story of second acts, yet his own life contradicted that. By the time he died at 44, he was broke, forgotten, and convinced that both he and his country had lost their way. That's what makes The Great Gatsby more than a period piece. It's not just a portrait of one decade, it's the anatomy of a dream that repeats itself. Every generation builds its own West Egg, its own illusion of success. The 1920s had champagne. We have screens. The means change, but the hunger stays the same. When Gatsby stares across the bay at the green light, he's not only looking at Daisy, he's looking at America, a nation always reaching for something just out of reach. That's why the novel still feels current a century later. It's about the mirage we call progress, and how every age mistakes the glitter for gold. As the last note of jazz fades, you realize that Fitzgerald wasn't just chronicling his time, he was warning ours. The psychological and moral lens, desire as self-destruction. The music fades again, replaced by something slower, the quiet hum of a single piano note that lingers in the air like longing itself. Every great tragedy begins with a dream. And in The Great Gatsby, that dream is not only romantic, but psychological, an obsession so powerful it reshapes a man's identity. Gatsby doesn't just love Daisy, he worships her. She isn't a person to him anymore. She's a symbol, a vessel for everything he lost, everything he wants to become. To understand Gatsby's psychology, we have to look at the boy he once was, James Gatz of North Dakota. Poor, ambitious, hungry. A boy who used to stare at the mansions along the shore and imagine himself inside. When he meets Daisy, she becomes the embodiment of that fantasy, beauty, wealth, acceptance. Loving her isn't about affection. It's about self-invention. She is his mirror and his mask. Fitzgerald makes this painfully clear. When Gatsby shows Daisy his mansion, he isn't just showing her where he lives, he's showing her who he's become. He took out a pile of shirts and began throwing them one by one before us, Nick recalls. Shirts of sheer linen and thick silk and fine flannel. Daisy buries her face in them and begins to cry. Why? Because she realizes the impossible, that all of this was built for her, but she can no longer belong to it. The dream has become too big, too heavy, too late. Psychologically, Gatsby's love is what Freud might have called a repetition compulsion, the need to recreate a lost moment in order to master it. He's trying to return to that first kiss with Daisy, the instant when he believed the world could be perfect. But time doesn't bend to will. The harder he tries to repeat it, the further it slips away. That's why Fitzgerald gives us that haunting line. Can't repeat the past? Why, of course you can. It's tragic not because it's foolish, but because it's so deeply human. Every character in the novel is trapped in their own illusion. Daisy clings to comfort, Tom to control, Myrtle to the fantasy of rising above her class. Even Nick, who claims to be detached, is drawn to Gatsby's dream like a moth to light. What makes Gatsby different is his purity of purpose. His obsession is complete. He believes in the idea of love as redemption, as salvation. He believes that if he can win Daisy back, everything lost, youth, time, identity, will return. In this way, Gatsby is less a man than a prayer. But Fitzgerald doesn't reward purity. He exposes it. The tragedy is that Gatsby's moral code, though flawed, is stronger than the world's. He is loyal to his illusion, while everyone else hides behind hypocrisy. When Daisy kills Myrtle, Gatsby's first instinct is not to save himself, but to protect her. "I'll say I was driving," he tells Nick. That line breaks the heart because it reveals the full measure of his devotion and his blindness. Daisy's silence afterward is the final betrayal, the world's indifference made personal. This is where morality in The Great Gatsby becomes slippery. Fitzgerald doesn't divide characters into good or evil, he paints them in shades of longing. Gatsby's Liar is beautiful, but it's still a lie. Tom's truth is ugly, but it's still truth. The novel's moral center lies not in virtue, but in awareness, the moment Nick finally sees the difference between dream and delusion. He realizes that Gatsby's greatness is tragic, precisely because it's pure. Psychologically, Gatsby represents what philosophers call the tragic optimist, the soul who keeps believing in beauty despite every proof of decay. That's why readers can't hate him. He's guilty, but he's sincere. He's foolish, but he's faithful. His downfall doesn't come from corruption, but from belief. In his world, hope itself becomes a form of self-destruction. Fitzgerald seems to be asking a question that still feels modern. How much of who we are is built from what we desire? Gatsby's entire personality is performance, accent and wardrobe, name, and yet it's real because he believes it so deeply. There's something almost existential in that. Like Camus' absurd hero, Gatsby insists on meaning even in the face of meaninglessness. He believes that longing can be a kind of truth, but the novel doesn't end with triumph. It ends with stillness, a pool, a gunshot, a dream dissolving into water. Gatsby dies waiting for a call that never comes, and somehow we feel both pity and admiration. Because deep down, we understand him. We too have built illusions and lived inside them. We too have believed that if we just hold on a little longer, love or success or happiness will come back to us. In that sense, The Great Gatsby isn't just about one man's downfall. It's about the human tendency to chase after light we can never touch, the desire that makes us alive, and the delusion that undoes us. And as the piano note fades, we're left with the echo of that impossible question. Was Gatsby destroyed by the world's cruelty or by the purity of his own dream? The critical and philosophical lens, dream or delusion. The sound design shifts now, a faint hum of city noise under a low violin, the kind of music that feels suspended between sorrow and wonder. Every generation that reads The Great Gatsby seems to find itself in it, because the novel is built on a riddle that never quite resolves. Was Gatsby a victim of his time or of his own illusion? Was he a romantic hero who dared to believe in beauty, or a self-made con man trying to buy transcendence? The truth lies somewhere in between, and that's where Fitzgerald's genius lives. From a Marxist perspective, The Great Gatsby is a fable of class, the dream of social mobility colliding with the brick wall of privilege. Gatsby's death is not just personal tragedy, it's a social commentary. He can buy a mansion, throw parties for senators and movie stars, even change his name, but he can't buy belonging. The Buchanans represent a class whose wealth is old enough to be invisible, and whose power is so secure it feels like fate. Tom sneers at Gatsby because he senses what Gatsby threatens, the idea that money could ever make everyone equal. The novel ends by proving him right. In Fitzgerald's America, wealth opens every door, except the one marked respect. A feminist reading offers another dimension. Daisy Buchanan is often judged harshly, dismissed as shallow or cruel. But through a modern lens, she looks less like a villain and more like a woman trapped by her own gilded cage. The society she lives in rewards beauty but punishes independence. Her voice is full of money because that's the only language she's allowed to speak. She marries Tom not out of love, but survival. She stays with him because the world gives her no real alternative. When she retreats into comfort after Gatsby's death, it's not malice, it's conditioning. Fitzgerald's era could imagine a self-made man, but not a self-made woman. Daisy's tragedy is that she has been turned into an ornament in a story written by men. From a philosophical standpoint, the novel pulses with existential tension. Gatsby's pursuit of the past is a metaphor for the human condition itself, our refusal to accept impermanence. He embodies what Sartre would later call bad faith, the denial of reality in order to sustain an illusion. Yet he also possesses a strange kind of moral courage. Unlike the Buchanans, who drift through life anesthetized by privilege, Gatsby feels everything. He suffers because he dares to care. His dream may be false, but it's sincere. And Fitzgerald, rather than mocking him, seems to mourn him. The eyes of Dr. T. J. Eckelberg, those faded spectacles watching over the Valley of Ashes, add a spiritual undercurrent. Some critics call them the novel's silent god, a symbol of divine indifference in a secular age. The characters pass beneath them, oblivious, as if the eyes record human vanity but offer no salvation. Others interpret them as an early image of modern surveillance, a world where every act is witnessed, but never judged. Either way, they remind us that in Gatsby's universe, morality has no home. It has been replaced by spectacle. Toni Morrison once pointed out something that reshaped how modern readers see the novel. She wrote that The Great Gatsby constructs its vision of purity and desire against an unspoken backdrop of race. The entire story unfolds in a white, insulated bubble, where class anxiety replaces the racial tension of the real America outside. Morrison called this the Africanist presence, the idea that whiteness defines itself by pretending other identities don't exist. This silence, she argued, is what allows Fitzgerald's dream to glitter so cleanly. It's not a criticism of Fitzgerald's intent, but a revelation of the cultural blindness that shaped his world. Through that lens, the novel becomes not just a story of love and money, but of erasure, what must be left out for a dream to feel pure. The existential layer deepens when we read Gatsby as a tragic optimist, a man who refuses to accept life's randomness. Like Camus's Sisyphus, he pushes his boulder uphill every day, knowing it will roll back down. Yet he keeps pushing because the act itself gives him meaning. When Nick says, Gatsby turned out all right at the end, he doesn't mean morally. He means spiritually. Gatsby's devotion, however naive, is an act of rebellion against emptiness. His flaw is not that he dreams too much, it's that the world around him dreams too little. In that way, the novel becomes a mirror held up to the 20th century, and to us. It warns what happens when desire becomes ideology, when wealth replaces wonder, when love is mistaken for ownership. Fitzgerald isn't simply writing about people, he's writing about civilization on the edge of spiritual collapse. And yet, he does it with tenderness. Even as he exposes his characters' corruption, he grants them the grace of sadness. They are not monsters, only lost souls. By the time we reach the final page, The Great Gatsby feels less like a social novel and more like a meditation on time itself. Every human being in it is at war with the clock. Gatsby wants to rewind it. Daisy wants to freeze it. Tom hides behind its routine. Nick tries to make sense of it. And Fitzgerald, perhaps more than any of them, fears it. He knew how fragile youth and beauty were, how quickly champagne turns flat. His prose glows because he was writing against extinction. So when we ask whether Gatsby's dream was noble or delusional, the answer is both. It was the last prayer of a believer in a world that had stopped believing. The receptive lens, what readers see in Gatsby today. The tone shifts once more, the faint sound of waves and distant laughter, like a party echoing across time. The story may be nearly a century old, yet its reflection still moves in the modern world. Every generation rediscovers The Great Gatsby as if it were written for them. In classrooms, book clubs, online forums, even on TikTok, readers debate what it really means. Some see it as a love story. Others call it a cautionary tale about wealth and rot. And many read it as a mirror, a portrait of our own digital age, painted with the colors of the past. On Twitter and Reddit, Young readers often describe Gatsby as the original influencer. He curates his life like an Instagram feed. The clothes, the cars, the mansion, all designed to create a version of himself that others will envy. He throws parties not for joy, but for visibility. In the 1920s, the spotlight was the newspaper society page. Today, it's the algorithm. The platforms have changed, but the hunger to be seen remains exactly the same. Others on social media defend him passionately. One comment that went viral read, "Gatsby is what happens when a romantic tries to survive in a capitalist world." That sentence captures why people still ache for him. He's not chasing money for money's sake. He's chasing meaning through the only language his world understands. It's what makes his dream tragic and relatable. But there's a growing number of readers who reject the myth. They argue that The Great Gatsby glorifies the very system it claims to criticize. On Reddit, one reader wrote, "It's just rich people being awful to each other. Why should I care?" Another added, "Maybe Gatsby deserved better, but maybe he was part of the problem too." These voices reveal something important, the novel's enduring ambiguity. It doesn't tell us who to love or who to hate. It lets us sit in discomfort. Meanwhile, feminist readers have reclaimed Daisy as more than a shallow figure. On TikTok, readers now ask, what if she isn't weak but exhausted? What if her so-called carelessness is a survival mechanism in a world that never let her be anything but decorative? Modern audiences are starting to see her as the trapped consciousness of her time, the quiet resistance hidden in a sigh. Literary critics continue to add new layers. Some post-colonial scholars draw attention to what the novel doesn't say, the racial and immigrant tensions simmering in the background of that glittering East Coast world. The America Gatsby dreams of is a filtered one, built on exclusion. His very ability to reinvent himself relies on pretending certain histories don't exist. Seen this way, his story becomes an allegory of privilege disguised as ambition. And yet, in spite of all this reanalysis, one truth remains. People feel something when they read this book. The language still stirs emotion. The imagery still glows. Readers talk about that green light the way believers talk about faith. It has become a symbol beyond the novel, the light of every unfulfilled hope, every goal always just out of reach. In memes and essays, it appears again and again, shorthand for the endless human chase after something we can't name. Even in film and pop culture, Gatsby never really left us. Jack Clayton's 1974 adaptation with Robert Redford bathed the story in melancholy nostalgia. Baz Luhrmann's 2013 version, drenched in neon excess and hip-hop beats, turned it into a fever dream of modern capitalism. Each adaptation reflects its era's idea of what the American dream looks like. Redford's Gatsby was sincerity in a crumbling world. DiCaprio's was spectacle under glass. Both work, because the myth fits every age that feels lost. Today, we scroll instead of dance. We build digital mansions out of curated photos and call them feeds. We chase likes instead of love, and yet the emotion is the same. That's why readers on TikTok whisper quotes like prayers. You can't repeat the past? Why? Of course you can. They're half joking and half hoping it might be true. What's most beautiful about The Great Gatsby's reception is how it keeps evolving. Scholars dig for symbols. Teenagers underline sentences about loneliness, and filmmakers reinterpret its light. The novel belongs to everyone because it refuses to settle. It offers glamour to the dreamers, warning to the cynics, and nostalgia to everyone in between. A reader on a literary forum once summed it up perfectly. It's not a story about wealth or love. It's about wanting to matter. That line could have been written by Fitzgerald himself. Because deep down, all of us, at one point or another, have stood at the edge of our own metaphorical bay, staring at something glowing in the distance, believing that if we could just reach it, everything would make sense. That's why The Great Gatsby keeps returning to us. Because it's not about a lost summer in 1922. It's about the condition of being human in every age, to dream, to reach, and to learn that some lights are meant to stay just beyond our grasp. The light that never goes out. The sound fades to something almost silent now, just a faint ocean breeze and the low hum of night. After all this glitter, what remains? Not the parties, not the money, not even the love story that fell apart before it ever had a chance to begin. What lingers is the pulse behind it all, the human need to believe that life can be more than what it is. The Great Gatsby endures because it captures the dream that built a nation and the heartbreak that followed. Fitzgerald wrote it in an age of jazz and chaos, but his words reach far beyond that decade. His story is our story, the endless search for meaning, for belonging, for that elusive green light across the bay. Gatsby believed in that light. He believed that if he worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and pretended beautifully enough, he could bridge the gap between what is and what could be. And even when everything failed, when Daisy's silence became unbearable, when the dream turned to ash, he never stopped believing. That's why Nick calls him great, not because he won, but because he never stopped trying. Fitzgerald himself wasn't far from Gatsby. He wrote with the same hunger, the same fragile hope. When he died, his books were out of print, his name nearly forgotten. Yet decades later, his words rose again, shimmering and alive, reborn. In that sense, Fitzgerald did what Gatsby could not. His dream survived him. Reading this book today feels like looking in a mirror that shows both the 1920s and tomorrow. We are still building mansions of illusion, only now they're digital, pixelated, and endlessly refreshed. We still measure worth by appearance. We still chase something glowing just out of reach. The dream hasn't died, it has only changed its costume. But maybe that's not entirely tragic. Maybe what matters isn't reaching the green light at all. Maybe it's the reaching itself, the audacity of hope, the beauty of belief. Gatsby's tragedy becomes our reminder that to dream, even foolishly, is to live. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Those final words still ache like a prayer. They remind us that time always wins, but that the human heart never stops trying to race it. And now, as the music fades, I'll leave you with a question. Do you think Gatsby was destroyed by his illusion or redeemed by his belief? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear how the story lives in you. If you enjoyed this journey through The Great Gatsby, please like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Books, and share it with someone who still believes in impossible dreams. Every click helps us keep bringing stories like this to life. The green light is still out there, somewhere waiting.